It's my weekly best decks roundup, and it feels like it would be wrong not to kick this off by talking about the obvious boogeyman secondary created in the format, Hela. Hell Cow got an absolutely massive upgrade, losing 2 points of power, but moving from on reveal to activate. With Hell Cow now being an activate effect that you can use on turn 6 before Hela reveals, in tandem with other very controlled discard like Blade and Lady Sif, this combo deck is not only incredibly difficult to interact with as always, but it's also incredibly consistent now because there's essentially no risk in what you're binning. This deck list is good at not having priority on the last turn, so things like Shang-Chi aren't good at chopping down your big things, and even when your opponent has numbers that can compete with you to a degree, they don't know exactly where your points are going to end up at because of the RNG element that Hela has inside of it, meaning that this deck is now a really potent force to be reckoned with. My Jeff's picks this week kick off with my favorite anti-meta deck right now, an Annihilus Clog deck. I think Clog in particular is one of the best ways to combat Hela. If you can fill up their lanes even 3 out of 4, you get to greatly restrict their ability to put stats out on the final turn of the game, making it more predictable where you need your own numbers to land. And I think playing the slightly bigger version of Clog featuring Sentry and Annihilus is a great way to get a leg up on opposing Clog decks that are going to be lower to the ground looking to metagame against Hela that we'll look at here in a little bit. This particular Clog list also has a small movement package in it. Dagger, slid around on the last turn of the game, often provides 12 points worth of power for just 2 energy, and Madam Web, one of our recent card releases, lets us tee that dagger up in advance so we can spend the final turn of the games using other bigger plays while still getting a ton of points out of this 2-drop. Madam Web is also especially tricky in this deck when paired with Sentry because now your opponent doesn't just need to fill the right side of the board, they need to account for Annihilus kicking that -8 power void across in any of the 3 lanes, which is generally impossible for them to keep up with. I'd like to take a quick minute to tell you about the sponsor of today's video, Metafy. Metafy has added a brand new part to their platform that allows you to support creators like myself directly, with 100% of the money that you support with going directly to the creator that you're supporting. If you're someone who enjoys the content that I make here for Marvel Snap and you want to help this continue to be able to be my full-time job, consider supporting me directly. If you're in the position to even support with $1 per month, that's more direct support than I would get if you watched every single advert on every single YouTube video and Twitch stream that I did in a 30-day period. If you're someone who's in a position to support a little bit more than that, at the $4 tier and above, you also gain access to my exclusive supporter-only Discord server where myself and the community are chatting about Marvel Snap and video games and sports and politics and food and all sorts of other things 24 hours a day. So if you're interested in picking my brain even during offline hours, that's an excellent way to do it. Shout out again to Metafy for only creating this awesome platform for people to be able to support on, but also sponsoring this video today to promote it extra to you all at home. Now, let's go ahead and get back to the deck list, shall we? My second Jeff's pick this week is what's become my stock version of Bounce, the archetype that I've easily played the most with since Marvel Snap released. Even when the metagame becomes pretty frustrating for me, I can always find some small amount of joy by picking my 1 energy cards up and playing them back out again, mastering sequencing decisions that always manage to tickle my brain. I will say this deck list does feel relatively competitive against Hela. You generally can go quite large inside of 2 lanes, letting you beat anything except their most RNG heavy draws where they stack up a ton of things all in one spot. It's also worth throwing out here that I did test Black Swan with Activate inside of this shell, and she was an incredible disappointment. I honestly think there's a chance she's worse as Activate than she was as on Reveal, and I think both of her designs are certainly worse than Wiccan inside of this core. We kick off our high potential category, i.e. decks that have promising stats and a smaller sample size than Untapped so far, with a Heimdall movement deck featuring our new card released this week in the Spanish Spider. two really noteworthy pieces of tech about this most successful Spanish Spider deck. The first is that in addition to Heimdall as a 6 energy card, it's also playing Goliath, which is quite the shell game to leave your opponent guessing as to which powerful 6-drop effect you're going to implement. The second is that it's also playing Cosmo. Essentially, between Cosmo and Goliath, you can kind of tap down any interaction your opponent might have, such as Shadow King, Shang-Chi, or even a Killmonger if you're a little bit lucky, to stop them from interacting with the large move threats that you're setting up. I will say that while this was the best performing move shell by a good margin in the untapped stats as of the recording of this video, it is worth noting that Ghost Spider in particular spent most of this week bugged in combination with Falcon and Beast, i.e. when you bounced her and then played her back out, she just wouldn't move anything the second time around. So I think there's a chance that a number of the bounce movement shells are actually quite better than their stats on Untapped would currently imply, but we're going to need to let some data build up after the bug fix that was implemented on Thursday to see if that's actually the case. Our second high potential deck list this week is a really neat take on Hitmonkey featuring no bounce cards. In particular, it looks to leverage the Hope Summers Kitty Pride package to generate extra energy going into that last turn of the game, so you can play out a bunch of stats in a big flourish that makes it difficult for your opponent to predict where they're going. This deck list also gets to leverage Gwenpool in tandem with Mysterio, which lets you take her normally 6 points worth of bonuses and get them to even more, since the Mysterio clones share that +2, 4, or 6 with the main Mysterio when they reveal at the end of the game. To our top performing category, decks that have a proven track record and good success on the Untapped tracker right now, we kick things off with an Ajax Affliction deck. I will say I was actually a little bit surprised to see this deck still putting up strong numbers, considering the most popular Hela variations are featuring Luke Cage. That being said, this deck list has felt really strong to me in games played in the past, so I wouldn't be surprised if it just has really good stats against the 80-ish% of the field that's not Hela to make up for the fact that you're going to be losing equity against a deck playing Luke Cage. Up next, we have the Gilgamesh Kazoo deck trucking along as one of the most consistently top performing decks Marvel Snap has had. One of the really noteworthy callouts this week looking at the untapped metrics is that the build of this Zoo deck featuring Cosmo has significantly better stats than the build playing Kyera in that slot. I don't think this is a coincidence. Cosmo lets you play a shell game to catch Hela in that matchup. It also takes matchups against decks like Wong and potentially Mr. Negative and turns them from being atrocious to being winnable or potentially actively good if your tech card shows up. Our next top performer in Phoenix Force is also a phenomenal choice for interfacing with your weekend mission, since it's playing not only the Spanish Spider in our latest card release, but also Symbiote Spider-Man, our current season pass card. Spanish Spider in particular seems like a really stellar addition to this deck. She can allow multiple man to get bigger when you have a more fair movement game plan, and she also acts as an additional way to make your Nimrod larger when that destroy plan is what you're looking to execute. This can be especially useful in tandem with Arnim Zola, because you can now Shuri, activate Spanish Spider, play Nimrod into the Shuri path, get it doubled up, and then slide it to the right all on its own, so Zola can be guaranteed to hit it, giving you 14 times 2 worth of stats, or 28 in the other 2 lanes. Our next top performer this week is Traditional Clog. This deck has a phenomenal Hela matchup. Not only can you just fill their entire side of the board before Hela deploys, but with Dr. Octopus's rework, you can often pull Hela into play with precision early on, leaving them completely stranded playing a fair game plan that's nowhere near powerful enough to keep up with you most of the time. Moving along to our other popular decks past Hela, Destroy is not only the second most popular deck per untapped metrics in most of the slices, but it's also got some top performing stats. It's worth noting that these traditional 12 cards that have mostly been locked in since Nico Minara released are still the best way to play this archetype by the stats. There were a few builds that were testing Spanish Spider in a few different slots, and their metrics are all markedly worse than this traditional build not playing our latest card release. Finally, Ereshim clocks in as the third most popular deck in most of the slices I looked at on Untapped. However, it's worth noting that this one has dropped the top performing category because its performance metrics are absolutely mediocre now. It seems like bringing Loki down to a 2 energy card, as well as cranking the deck count up to 27, has really reined in what this deck is looking to do. While I agree it can be incredibly frustrating to play against, its incredibly random output range, I think the numbers don't lie, and its performance seems to be fairly non-problematic in our current metagame. While there's definitely things to fiddle with in the current metagame, I will say my personal enjoyment of the game has gone down markedly since they changed Hellcow to activate and Hela became a dominating force in the metagame. I think metagames that are dominated by Hela and Clog tend to be pretty brew unfriendly because you can't put enough tools in your deck to keep up with both of those archetypes, especially when you factor in other more linear decks like Mr. Negative and Living Tribunal also pop up around the edges to try and go over the top of Hela. If you think you've cracked this format and something that I didn't review today, I would love to hear about it in the comments down below. And as always, if you enjoyed my personal roundup, be sure to snap that like button. Also, shout out again to Metafy for sponsoring today's video and providing me with a fantastic platform for folks like you to support my content directly. I really appreciate all the folks that contribute to what I do here in that direct manner. It's a big part of what allows this to be my full-time job day in and day out.